think it's interesting that part of the conversation today that doesn't exist, that used to exist 5 years ago, and every publication was writing about it, are face-to-face meetings going to disappear because of technology. We're sitting here 5 years later, that's not even a discussion anymore, because people know that face-to-face meetings aren't going anywhere. We know face-to-face meetings are always going to be necessary, and I think it's interesting that the conversation now is how do we utilize technology to enhance face-to-face meetings, not to replace it. But 5 years ago, that was a huge concern of a lot of people. I think that leads to a second point. Part of that concern was we have a younger generation, they only use technology, they're not going to want to meet face-to-face. All of the research is telling us the opposite right now. They, in a larger number, will actually embrace face-to-face meetings. They're looking for professional development, they're looking for mentorship. The one thing I keep repeating to people is if you look at the older millennials look like every other generation. The millennials are 28 to 34. They're not different than the other generations. They use technology more than the other generations, but their wants and needs, they want professional development, they want face-to-face, they want mentoring, they want networking. That's all very familiar, and it's what we all did. And I think there's a separation that a 28 to 34-year-old, they're in their career. We thought they were going to change the world dramatically when we were all studying them and they were all 25, 26, and they were in their jobs or in school. I think that's a huge shift for our industry because, John Wooden used to have this saying, you need to move fast but not hurry. And I think as an industry that's important for us. We tend to take technology and run with it. And technology, they're just tools. And they should be tools that enhance and embrace what we're already doing in face-to-face. And I think sometimes we run too fast and we're hurrying. And then we're backtracking because it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, who's talking about Google Glasses today?
Yeah.
Everybody was writing about them. I still see the pictures, and they're non-existent.
So in other words, to be a bit more reflective about, not just embracing the newest and flashiest new thing, but to realize how it might be able to help, and really look at how it would carry forward some of the things that have already been built as a foundation.
I think it's important to know what's the behavior, and is there a behavior shift? And I talked about this earlier because we had a speaker from Airbnb today, and we talk about Airbnb. I don't think that behavior is that different because I always joke that I've had friends that have been renting beach houses in California for 20 years. They've always rented a beach house. They bring the family. What's just changed is it's easier to access through an Airbnb. I don't think the behavior is that dramatically different, and sometimes we look at it like it's earth-shattering. It's just a shift in technology. It's a shift in how we do something, but not the why we're doing it. And I think that's important for our industry to start to recognize. Why are we still here? And at the end of the day, I think one of the big shifts when you say what we're not doing, we're not customizing enough at enough events in enough ways how we distribute and disseminate content and what that looks like. And we've all known this for years because all studies have told you that some of us learn visually, some of us are more audio, some of us are more sensory, yet we teach one way. So we've been doing that and ignoring it for years, and now you can't ignore it because you add on top of that all of the different audiences that are sitting there. We have to customize. We live in a customizable society. I always say on demand. We live in an on-demand society, so how do we start getting better at how we start to deliver that content in a variety of different ways, even in the same room? We're not really good at that yet, and we have to start to experiment and we have to start to explore. And there's one thing that I'm adamant about is we need to quit talking about demographics and start talking about psychographics. Because if the internet has taught us anything, is demographics are dead. Because Dan, you could like the exact same thing as a 20-year-old in China, and it has nothing to do with where they are in their life and how much they make or where they live. It's that you like the same things. That is important for us to understand in the meetings world. But we've spent so much time talking about demographics that we forget it's the psychographic that's important, that there's so many psychographics now existent because of the demographics. But we spend too much time thinking that it's the demographic that matters, how old you are. No, it just matters on what you like. Because I know, and I've twice, and I have a witness sitting right over there with Sandy, but twice I have actually, during this World Education Congress, I have had the experience where I have taught a millennial that is under 30 in both cases, something about technology that they had no idea, and they both said, wow, You really do use technology. Teaching a 28-year-old yesterday what Periscope was quite fun for me, because he said, "Oh, I just learned about Periscope 2 weeks ago." I go, "Really? It's been around for about 5 months now." And we started to explain on what that is. My whole point to that, I'm an older Xer. It has nothing to do with my age. It has everything to do with I'm a believer in technology and what it can do and how we utilize it. That is kind of the best point I can make, that it was a younger generation that hadn't embraced it yet, probably will, but it has nothing to do with our demographics. It has to do with what we like and what we do.
So you seem to be talking about progress being part of a continuum, and that forms might change. In this case, technology changes, but essentially, a lot of the same things in substance are there.
Absolutely, and I think the biggest shift that I see, not only for our industry, but in all industries, is content is not king. Context is. And our job as educators, our job as publications, our job as meetings, is to provide context to content, not to give me content. And for so many years, it was always about the content. Well, to me, that's the dramatic shift in technology. The content's at my fingertips. I can YouTube or Google anything I need to find out. What I don't have is the context on how does that come into my life to make me a better professional or better personally. I think that's what meetings are now being required to do, and we're not good at it yet because it's not a core competency for all of us. But I think context is the word of the future if you're talking about where we progress. It's not about delivering content in meetings anymore, because I don't need the meeting for that. But I do need to talk to my peers to see how they've used it, how they've embraced it, how have they improved their businesses. That's where the meetings and the context start to tie together. At one time, that was such a big issue, and I know it was, but MPI specifically, we had 3 female chairs in a row 20 years ago. We broke through that glass ceiling a long time ago, and I think it's incumbent upon us to really talk about leadership and advancement, not by gender, but by leadership and advancement. I'm a little bit of a believer in that, because I even put it into the into my Hispanic model, because I have friends that, if they don't get something, and if they don't get promoted, and if they don't get an advancement they're looking for, immediately it's because they're Hispanic. And my problem is, if you don't ever sit back and reflect, and that becomes your rationale on why you didn't get something, you're never going to improve to get there.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're just not prepared. Sometimes you weren't the best candidate, and that had nothing to do with you being a female, that had nothing to do with me being Hispanic, that had to do with I wasn't the best candidate. Yeah. So how do I get to be the best candidate? And where I am really encouraged, I have a 28-year-old that works for us at one of our hotels, and I meet with all of our staff, and they're always welcome to get on my calendar. She got on my calendar, we're talking, and she finally got a role as an entry-level salesperson, and she told me she was turned down 4 times before she got the role, and she said it was the best thing that happened to me, because every time I did, I stepped back and reflected on what do I need to do to get there. Not once was there an excuse.
So when she did get the job, she was much better qualified probably than when she first took it.
And she was hungry.
Because how much self-reflection she'd done.
Yeah, and she is very hungry to prove herself. And I told her, you make me so proud of this younger generation, because, again, for all the synopsis and summaries I've seen of millennials, the millennials I dealt with in my organization don't fit that at all. I see them that they don't see any restrictions, and I think as an industry we have to listen a little bit more, because when they talk about they want to grow, and I hear that often, they tell me, Mike, you sitting here with me, getting your time, is me growing. Mm-hmm. It didn't mean they wanted a promotion. It didn't mean they wanted a raise. They wanted to learn. Mm-hmm. They wanted to grow. Mm-hmm. And I think that's important, because I think sometimes older generations hear, well, they don't want to pay their dues. You just hear that wanting to grow usually means I want to learn. Yeah. It doesn't mean I was asking for a raise, and it doesn't mean I was asking for a promotion before I was due. It's saying I just want to learn.